powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and they'll have plenty to talk about this offseason, which is underway. The Eagles have lost coordinators John Gannon to Arizona and coordinator Shane Steichen to Indianapolis. How do they pick up the pieces from that? We'll look. Adam Caplan is here for Football at 4 as we take a look at Super Bowl 57 and the offseason, which has quickly snuck up on us because the Eagles now have 2 huge vacancies. All right, let's talk a little bit about the offense. You talked about, or the Chiefs, you talked about them running the ball. I thought that was a big factor of them keeping the Eagles' defense off balance in the second half because they literally went run, pass, run, pass. They just didn't let the defense get into a rhythm.
Mike, that was another thing. On our pregame show, Jeff mentioned it, and I'm not sure why he did. He goes, what if they actually ran the ball? And I laughed. I'm like, come on, Andy, come on. He doesn't run the football. Well, what happened was the Eagles said, you're not throwing deep. In fact, the only ball that they missed on it, I can't remember, was it Valdez Scantling, the ball, it maybe was thrown to the wrong shoulder, or he just didn't see it. But they could not get anything deep. So once the Eagles saw what they were doing with Kelsey, they slowed Kelsey down. So what happened was it was a nickel and dime offense. It was everything short because that's where the Eagles struggle by analytical data. From my friend Warren Sharp, he told me before the game, I saw him at Radio Row, he said the one issue he has with the Eagles defense is you could throw short, and what I told him is, I know why, because the Eagles play their corners off. Even though the Eagles played a lot of man coverage, their corners don't press. And the Chiefs, Mike, took everything they could short, and they nickel and dimed them. Now, usually, if you're going to do that, you feel like you could stop a team in the red zone. Well, we know how bad the Eagles' red zone defense was in this game, and the Eagles went against the number one red zone offense in the National Football League. The red zone defense was terrible in this game.
Yes, and that's the thing, Adam, is a 10-point lead. Why did they lose? The issues with the defense in the second half was they are generally a team that lets you nickel and dime them because they're waiting for you to make a mistake. You're going to have a 10 to 12-play drive. Somewhere in there you're going to fumble, or you're going to get a sack, or there's going to be a penalty. Something's going to happen. Kansas City was nearly flawless, and because you couldn't get to the quarterback, that negated what you did all season long on defense.
Yeah, it was 2 things. It was short passing game, get out of his hands, but 2.5 or less, 2.5 seconds or less. And this is not an excuse. I'm just telling you what people who would know, who were at the game, told me, NFL people. They could not. They was like running in mud. They could not. And this is for both teams. This is why Chris Jones did not have the game that most people thought he would have. You could not get out of your stance. They just could not get a pass rush. But what I said to one person who worked for an NFL team who was there, I'm like, boy, that sure didn't hurt Jalen Hurts because he threw the heck out of it. So, but I get it. He's not a defensive player. But overall, look, there were a lot of things that went wrong for their defense in the second half. But in the end, it's not like they. It was kind of one of these games, Mike, like the Super Bowl. They won in 17. Over 1,100 yards. It was going to come down to who had the ball last, pretty much, and that's let's forget about who got the ball last. It was irrelevant then because there was not enough time left. But if the Bradbury play does not happen, the call, and by the way, that was the right call by the rule, but we can get into that in a second. We may have a different result.
Yeah, obviously that's a huge play in the game, and how it's called. And listen, it's a penalty. I have no problem with them saying it's a penalty, Adam. The problem I have is you didn't call that all night. It's like a pitcher who sees an umpire who's giving him the corner, and he's going to keep throwing in that spot. Well, if you're going to let the guy do it all night, you can't call it in that moment on that play. The other problem I have is the positioning of that official who threw that flag as opposed to the official who was standing on the 15-yard line where that penalty was occurred and did not throw the flag. So that play is a huge factor in the game.
Yeah, and someone who I really respect in the league said to me, it works for teams, said to me, he was at the game, he goes, look, that's a penalty any time of the day. He clearly grabbed the jersey. I mean, you could see it, I guess, if you're sitting close enough or watching the monitor, you know it's a penalty. But there were at least 2 instances earlier in the game there should have been defensive holding, one on the Eagles and one on the Chiefs. They didn't call it. So So that's the problem. I think is a legitimate complaint, Mike. I have no problem with people saying, "Well, okay, that's a penalty here, but why the hell didn't you call it earlier in the game when you saw it?" So this is the problem people who work for NFL teams have. Be consistent with the calls. When you see it, throw the flag. This has been since the game happened, Mike. This is what I came up with. I'm not an Eagle fan, so I'm impartial. Mosher and I, that's our job to be. The reason why we have the show like it is because people know we're impartial, despite it being an Eagle show. But what we'll say, and we'll get Jeff's comment on it when we do our pod for Thursday. But I have my point is that it's simple. If you see it, call it. And they did not call it when they saw it early in the game. But I mean, I give Bradbury credit. He felt he felt he can get away with it. He didn't. We saw it. And it's a flag. But the rule is, and I said this to anyone who asked me, I know the rule very well. You cannot restrict movement by grabbing the jersey. You just can't. Even if it's light, you can't.
Yep.
I just wish they would have called it early in the game.
Correct. Yeah, and there's a play early in the game with Bradbury and Juju where there is no call. And Juju, by the way, he is jumping up and down, palms up, screaming for the penalty early in the game. No such body language in this second one. It was almost as if he didn't feel he was impeded that much. And that throw was, I don't know if that was a catchable ball.
But see, that's the problem, Mike. That the rule in field is not. It doesn't matter. You call the penalty as it's ruled. There's certain times when refs will not call it, but it's not in the field of play. They're going to call it. That's the way that they're taught. I remember Mike Pereira telling me that. And you can't legislate intent. Also, you just call it the way that you see it. It's a shame. It does bother me. This was it. I would say this also. This has nothing to do with Eagles losing. I would say the 17 game from a watchability standpoint was better. This one was close, though. This one was close.
Yep, obviously that. And listen, Adam, we had talked a lot about the course of the year because there wasn't a lot of faults with this team. There wasn't a lot of warts. But we said one of these games maybe the special teams get you. And it came up to get them in the biggest game of the year. And I guess one question would be, should Sipos even have been punting in this game?
Well, Brett Kern didn't exactly earn it, though.
No, but I mean, you got a guy who hadn't punted for 2 months.
Well, I get it. Well, he did because he was practicing. But here's the problem, though. Like you said, I think what you meant is in a game he hasn't punted.
Correct. Yes.
And that's absolutely the truth. And here's the problem: Brett Kern was not. I don't have a problem with Eagles signing him because I know for a fact, talking to someone who knew, his workout with the Cardinals was really good. Well, I don't know what happened since that workout in September. He's kind of done, Brett Kern. He lost it. And that's one area when we look at free agency, and we start our free agency shows next week. We're going to announce something, by the way. We're going to keep it quiet. But we just agreed that we're going to do something really special next week, which we're going to announce. But I could tell you in free agency, we're starting our shows next week. I can't believe I got to say this, but that's going to be on our topics. That's a priority. They got to get a better punter.
Well, that punt, it's a low line drive. It seemingly was to the wrong side of the field because it looked like the Gunners and the snapper were going one way, they're going the other. So it is just a recipe for a big play. Tony takes it down to the 5, and obviously that play really ends up hurting you there. Let's get into what's next now because today, obviously, the offseason starts. Shane Steichen is the new head coach of the Colts, Adam. So let's talk about they lose Steichen. Is this an in-house replacement?
Yeah, so in my reporting I put out Sunday that most likely, I mean, I don't want a percentage on it, but most likely, based on what I've been told by multiple people, that the number one choice would be Brian Johnson. I know the Panthers had interest in looking at him as their OC. The fact that they did not put a slip in would tell me that he's probably going to be the guy. And the second choice would be Kevin Patullo, but number one for them would be Brian Johnson. And that way it would keep everything, the continuity with Jalen Hurts. The two are very close. They've known each other for going well back to his high school days, actually before that, I believe. So that's the way they would look at there. And then, obviously, they'd have to look at how they would handle the quarterback coaching job. And Patullo, by the way, could do that, so that would not be a big deal. But, look, losing Steichen is a big one because he did a phenomenal job of understanding what Hurts is good at and what he's not. And they work so well together, along with Brian Johnson, of course, and Sirianni and Patullo. So this happens in the National Football League. When you have the best offense in football, and you have the best offensive line in football, and you have a very aggressive play caller, they're probably going to look at that play caller. That's what happened here.
Then, of course, on the defensive side of the ball, and obviously, Gannon, not the most popular guy, but what are they losing with John Gannon, and what are some of the options?
Well, here's the problem here. You lose Gannon, people can say what they want. We're going to talk more about this on our Thursday morning podcast, which drops on 6 a.m. We've got our tape notes. I could tell you what I thought is not really what happened. I could just tell you in that game, Mike, they play way more man coverage than you could tell on TV. This is why TV copy is a waste of time. You really can't tell much. But I did talk to two people. They definitely wanted to shut down Kelsey. They wanted to control him as much as they could. They did a decent job of that. But as I said earlier, they got nickel and dimed. But John did a very good job. He's a solid coordinator. I'm kind of with people. I do worry about it in the big moment as a play caller. Why did he come up short against Dallas? They were terrible in that game. Why couldn't they get off the field here? That's a fair criticism. But the guy's a good football coach, charismatic, connects well with players, and he really responds and listens to his players when they come up with suggestions. Not a lot of play callers are willing to do that. That's one of the reasons why Graham and Reddick, who had a breakout season, who attributes a lot of the success to Gannon, that to me is why you have to keep the scheme. It's very important they keep this 34 front with two overhangs, which is like a 5-2. I would be very surprised if they went out and didn't. Now, Denard Wilson would be the in-house candidate. Outside, it's a little bit harder. Sean Desai, who, by the way, coached at Temple, who did a great job as Bears defense coordinator for 1 year. He's now the assistant head coach of defense for the Seahawks. He might be a guy. But you're going to look for someone who could run this defense. This defense has worked really, really well. No question about it.
Yep, and obviously they had a rough night in especially in the red zone against the Chiefs. But the point you brought up is an interesting one. It seemed that any time, look, they had a great defense all year long. When they really struggled in the 2 years, because they played defense pretty well last year, except for when they played Patrick Mahomes and when they played Dak Prescott and when they played, it seemed that any time there was a high-level quarterback, they struggled.
Well, against Rodgers, he got hurt in that game. They had some good moments. They had a great pick. Blankenship had a great pick. Jordan Love came off the bench. They couldn't prepare for him. No, if you look at this season, Mike, here are my issues with Gannon. Terrible performance in Week 16. I know Maddox got hurt in that game, but I'm sorry, that was bad. But on your point, if you really look at it, they didn't face Prescott in Week 6. They did a great job. I mean, you could say what you want about Kirk Cousins. He's in upper half of the NFL quarterbacks. Talk to anyone who works for an NFL team; they'll tell you that. I mean, it's just not me. They did a great. That was probably one of Gannon's best coach games. I know it was Week 2, but they did a great job. Remember, they shut down completely Justin Jefferson. Did a great job. Throw away the rain game in Week 4, where the quarterback Trevor Lawrence had all those picks. I mean, I don't even count that game. But when you really look at it, as you're saying, who do they really face of really good quarterbacks? So that's the thing. But the fact of the matter is, overall, the numbers speak for themselves. Historic amount of sacks. Turnover numbers were great before Gardner Johnson got hurt. It's really hard. Fans want perfection. It's impossible. You're not going to find that. I feel their pain. I get it. I understand the criticism. But the guy's a way better coordinator than they think he is. But the only valid criticism I'll give, I do have an issue in the big moment, him coming up short, and I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fair, too.
We all see it.
Right.
I think it's fair.
I don't think anybody should claim, even if you're John Gannon's father, that this guy was perfection. He certainly wasn't. And I think he had a lot of... What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
he had his moments. But by the way, Jim Schwartz, the same thing. Jim Schwartz, Jeff and I crushed in 2020. I mean, I was sick and tired of seeing these mistakes picking defense. And now I get his personnel wasn't great, but also John Gannon, you said he did a good job last year. My issue with him is, and we beat him up over this, he coached to the limitations. He tried to hide Steven Nelson. It was embarrassing. I mean, I put this on my show, so this is nothing new, but a lot of people quoted me on it. There was a team I spoke with. This veteran quarterback said it was the easiest defense he'd ever gone against in his life, pitch and catch. They didn't challenge him. Sometimes last year they didn't challenge him. This year, because the personnel was better, they challenged him.
Last thing on that before we let you run, Adam Caplan, don't forget Inside the Birds has podcasts twice a week in the offseason now. You can get all the offseason news. In fact, I believe the traffic's probably almost higher in the offseason sometimes than it is in season because everybody wants to see how they're going to rebuild this thing. Text message from Jeff in EHT earlier. He says, I believe the defense success was more talent than scheme. In other words, people are not impressed with Gannon having the most sacks, the most the most turnovers, the number 1 or 2, depending on what stat you like. I mean, this was a top 5 defense statistically, but some people are saying it was because they had more talent, not his scheme.
Well, you can't just roll players out and say, okay, guys, why don't you coach yourself? You guys could do it on your own. You don't need me. I mean, it doesn't work that way. I understand what the guy's saying, but as Sirianni said, show me a good coach, show me great players. Show me a bad coach, which you didn't say. We probably don't have good enough players. That's really what he meant. I understand what this guy's saying, but look, let's talk about player development. Are you going to tell me T.J. Edwards would have been good in any scheme or just be good with any other coaches? No. Did Josh Sweat make tremendous progress over the last 2 years? Yes. Under this scheme. Did Javon Hargrave put up big numbers in the scheme? Yes. Did C.J. Gardner-Johnson do an unbelievable job? Have never played in this defense before learning it in season? Yes. So let's ease up on saying that the coach had nothing to do with it. And I've never met Jonathan Gannon. I'm not kissing the guy's butt. I'm just telling you. I've covered this business 22 years. It's about coaches. Coaching matters. I think people sometimes forget about that.
And not only that, I think the biggest one of them all, Hassan Reddick went from a guy who had 11 sacks, 12 sacks, to 18 and a half sacks. It became
not just that. He's never played this well. Let me just tell you something. He was actually not a liability in coverage, which shocked me. I talked to the Panthers. He was actually looking for $18 million. Not that they were not going to re-sign him anyway, but they were not there on the money, and he got. Oh, I say only he got $15 million. Mike, I mean, I just think sometimes. Even smart fans, they just hold grudges against coaches because they don't. The guy talks a certain way, or they don't like him, and they never let up. But I'm also willing to concede that the big moments were against Dallas when they could have won it. They could have gotten the bye. They still wound up getting the bye, but you would have rather not have had to play the Stars in Week 18. That's where I agree with those fans. I got no problem with that one.
Gotcha. All right, Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds. By the way, I implore you to look at Juju Smith-Schuster's last tweet.
I saw it. Hilarious.
Oh, my gosh. Well, A.J. Brown has fired back, but unlike the 49ers, very classy.
What did he say? What did he say? I didn't see it.
First off, congratulations. You all deserve it, but this is lame. You was on the way out of the league before Mahomes resurrected your career on your one-year deal, TikTok boy. He admitted that he grabbed you, but you act like you're like that was – I mean, but then he says, but congratulations again. So, all right. Well, we might have a little something here. By the way, these two teams should play on Thursday night kickoff next year on a
no doubt, man.
On a non-ice hockey. On a non-ice hockey surface.
Oh, yeah. Listen. I can only tell you what people tell me. You know, people I trust in the NFL. I didn't realize the turf. Look, we saw it watching it, but people at the game who I really trust, Mike, just buried the grass, and they had no axe to grind. Trust me, there wasn't an Eagles thing or a Chiefs thing.
No,
it's really embarrassing.
Yeah.
You notice the league has not said a word about it.
Oh, and listen, McMullen said last hour the power was off in the press box for over an hour. They couldn't charge laptops. They had no power in the press. Yeah, so it was just a mess overall.
And the Podsod god, George Toma, who's tremendous. I don't know what the hell happened. Here's a question I would have: Did they do their walkthrough in the stadium on Saturday? And if so,
right,
or maybe they did the Cardinals complex. I'm not sure, but that's embarrassing. How they did not know how bad the grass was. That shame on the NFL for this.
They need a Tuckahoe turf farm over there in Tuckahoe, Upper Township, to do it. They do Lambeau Field, so they should have done this place, right? I mean, unbelievable. That's bad. It's really bad, and it's unfortunate. But yes, the Chiefs and Eagles do play next year, and maybe it'll be Thursday night to kick off the season, a rematch there. All right, Adam Caplan.
I love that.
Adam Caplan, they got a ton of things to talk about this offseason. 18 free agents. They got to replace the coordinators. Jalen Hurts contract. Make sure you check out Inside the Birds. And, of course, football at 4 in the offseason right here on the Sports Bash. Adam, take care, bud.
Thank you.